Hello and welcome everybody. I'm Gareth Evans. I'm joined by Mike Williams here today. And we're going to have a little chat about Lawbreakers and online games in general, because there's been a blog post released yesterday, Thursday, by Bosskey Studios, who are behind the game Lawbreakers. They released a statement. The headline is basically they're moving on to another project less than 8 months after releasing the game, which does raise the question, how long do you expect an online game to be supported for, and what kind of longevity, lifespan do you expect an online game these days? Obviously 8 months, is that big? Well, we are going to take a look. If you guys aren't familiar, Lawbreakers is a game which is headed by Mr. Cliff Blesizinski, a former game director at Gears of War. You're probably familiar with that game. It's a first-person shooter game, online only, and people compare it to games like Overwatch because it looks similar in style. But this touts gravity-defying combat, which is a unique selling point.
That was one of the big things I noticed when I played it. There was a kind of beta and stuff before the game launched, and I took a spin of that, and that kind of does change things up a little bit. It kind of launched you into the air, kind of in certain zones of the map and whatever, and that was kind of the big point of the game. And there was a sports aspect to it almost, and it was different. It looks like Overwatch, it looked like a couple of these other kind of hero shooters, but it did do some things to set itself apart. But obviously the player numbers, it didn't find an audience, and that's the big problem. It didn't make it obvious how different it was to all the other games. I think that was probably the big problem.
It was dead on arrival, a lot of people were saying. It was released on August the 8th for PC and PS4 at $29.99. And Cliff Blesizinski famously said at the time on stage at E3, if I remember, none of this $60 multiplayer only bullshit. So that gives you an indication of the kind of mindset that he's got going in. And so the game released to generally positive reviews on Metacritic is 76, where it sits, which isn't bad, right, for a Metacritic.
It's good. It's fine. Yeah, it's a solid above game. 75. I think you get a green color on Metacritic, which is good.
Well, it's
better
it's
than
a green,
yellow color in it. So.
But like you said before, it was plagued by low player counts from the very beginning. Now let's take a look at some of those player counts. So the beta, which you referred to just then, that hit a player peak of 7,500 or 7,500 players, right? But the day of launch, which was the most peak players since it launched, 3,000 players managed to get online. This is on the PC, obviously. But since then, in 2018 alone, the players have peaked at 80.
Yeah.
The most amount of players at one time in this year so far are 80 players. But the average right now, only 3 players per hour.
Yeah, it's been weird. It's been like almost fascinatingly bad in terms of player counts. And I don't think the game, I don't know what the game's done to deserve that. I don't know what it's done to earn those really low levels. We've covered it multiple times on the channel as news videos and stuff. Just the fact that it has not found a player base at all. Not like it's found a small one. It's just 3 players at once. That's no one is playing it. So that could be members of the dev team or something. It's like.
And the problem is, how do you get a game, right? Because as a multiplayer game, you need a certain amount of players to play a game. So if you're like the fourth player logging on, and there's only 3 other players, you're not even going to get a game started. And one guy's in America, one guy's in Europe. Are they playing? What servers are you playing on? Like, you might be on your own. How do they do that? How does that work?
It's that thing where it's the complete opposite to a snowball effect as well, isn't it? Where it just kind of, rather than build up with momentum, it can't gain momentum. It's just lost complete momentum. And it's a real shame. It's got to be a big hit for the team as well, for working on a game for a long time like that. You seem to do everything right. You get your messaging kind of pro-consumer, and Cliff Blesizinski is obviously one of the more confident executives out there and stuff, and he's coming out with these bold statements and whatever. And you've spent a lot of time working on this game. It's got to be a big hit to the soul to see your game getting played by kind of 7 people or whatever at one time. So it's good to see them moving on, to be honest. I'm glad that they're going, hang on,
this ain't working, let's move on.
On a personal level. And I'm sure some of the players who are hanging around, they won't be happy because their game's not getting supported anymore. But you've got to draw a line somewhere. 3 players at one time.
Yeah.
I mean,
you can't go
carry on with
there.
that?
Yeah. You can't go in. So let's look at the blog post in its entirety, because I think it's good to read the whole thing out. So just to provide all the context, right? Dear Lawbreakers community, it's been a while since we said anything about Lawbreakers. With that, the past 4 months at Bosskey Productions has been especially trying, as we pride ourselves at being communicative and transparent. So here is the very real truth, which may not come as a surprise. The fact is, Lawbreakers failed to find enough of an audience to generate the funds necessary to keep it sustained in the manner we had originally planned and anticipated. And while a pivot to free-to-play may seem like the easiest change to make, a change of this magnitude takes publishing, planning, and resources to do it. The team here has worked hard on this game over the past 3.5 years, and our studio is determined to give this game the second life it deserves. However, between now and then, we cannot sit idle. We will continue to support the game in its current state, but also we need to focus on other projects with fresh creative leaders. We have been working on something new, and we can't wait to share more about it. It's a passion project that we're in complete control of. Thank you for your ongoing understanding and patience, Bosskey Productions. Now, that says a lot, but says very little at the same time.
Yeah, there's a lot of wiggle room there for what potentially they could do. It doesn't close the door completely on the game. It sounds like they may come back at some point and maybe adjust the model to go free to play. They're saying we've got to leave it there. We've got to leave it where it is now, and that's kind of ambiguous as to the future of the game.
Yeah,
maybe they can resuscitate it in the future, but for now they're working on another project. Right?
They're working on something else. However, they want to give it the second life it deserves, right? Yeah. They say that. Until then, we're working on this new project. Yeah. So does that mean that and also the line about free-to-play is ambiguous too. Because while a pivot to free-to-play may seem the easiest change to make, it will take resources to do that. It doesn't say whether they are or not. It just says, this seems like the easiest change to make. But then they go on to say, in the meantime, while we work on giving it a second life, is the second life mean free to play? Is that what they're meaning by that?
It could be that, but again, the wording's ambiguous, isn't it? It could be, I mean, a sequel. How many games have been given a second life by the second game being much better than the original, like Assassin's Creed 2? Assassin's Creed 2 is the game that really launched that franchise into what it is today. So it's there are many ways to go about it. I guess free to play is the obvious one, and that's probably the big suggestion that everyone would have, and go into being a free to play game and supporting that properly as a free to play title that requires constant monitoring and updates and patches and community management and community building. It is a big task. It's not as easy as just making it free on the store.
I mean, the problem for free to play is how do they monetize it, right, and support it, because they have to put resources into to maintain that free to play, maintain that player base, to keep it interesting, develop updates and stuff for the game. But switching free to play, they're not making that the price of purchase off them anymore. So how do they monetize it? And with the question being, with Cliff Blesizinski's anti-bullshit policy, the way that he is, right? Could they make money out of microtransactions? Could they push microtransactions? Obviously, cosmetic or whatever. Is that right for this game based on how Cliffy B is? It doesn't seem like a good fit to me.
You could monetize it in a ethical way for sure, but I definitely know where you're coming from. It's difficult for him to do anything because he's got no bullshit. Yeah. Well, what does bullshit mean? So you've got because some people think microtransactions are absolutely fine. A lot of people think they're fine. A lot of people think they shouldn't belong in any game or whatever. So it's difficult for them to move forward with anything like that. But I think it's just they've left it ambiguous, I think, is the big takeaway here. So nothing is out of the question, I suppose. And why would they? Why would they close the door on things like microtransactions and being free to play if that is a way for them to make money on this thing finally? Because they haven't made money on it. Clearly, they would have lost a lot of money making it.
Yeah, of course. And the other thing that's notable from the blog post to me is the terminology here, right? We're moving on to the other projects with fresh creative leaders. What does that mean for Cliffy B? He's not fresh. He's not fresh, is he? Because he's already there.
Cliffy B. He's a well-known, long-established veteran games industry.
Fresh creative leaders. So does that mean Cliffy B is not involved in the new project? And if not, is he just languishing in the Lawbreakers project, or are they going to get him working on something else? Yeah. What does that mean for Cliffy B? It's a big question mark for him, that's for sure.
It's interesting that they have put that in the statement or in the blog post. I think if that is the case behind closed doors, they obviously for some reason want people to know that a fresh pair of hands is coming in some form.
Yeah.
Why do they want people to know that? It's just, you've got to think hard and read between the lines of what's going on between behind closed doors with stuff like this. Especially if you're a part of the community and you're playing the game and you're on the subreddit and whatever, you want to know what's going on. They're not going to be obvious. There's going to be details in a statement like this that you should look at carefully. And things like that is a great example with fresh creative leaders.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does that and why have they chosen to put that in there? So
yeah, that is notable for sure. The other thing as well is it's easy to try and pick this apart, what happened with Lawbreakers, because it's quite fascinating to me, a game to be released and die so suddenly, because if you look at the player figures, they within a month it was like a fraction of what they launched at, and it's just been languishing in the doldrums ever since, right? So what went wrong with Lawbreakers? Was it just the Overwatch factor? Were so many people comparing it to Overwatch, saying, well, Overwatch is the better version or whatever? It failed to gain that player base. Like, what is it? Just an oversaturation of multiplayer games?
It's loads of things, isn't it? It's a crowded market. It's a difficult market. Steam is really hard for indies, and I guess it's really difficult for AAA games as well, because the saturation problem hits everyone. I remember the publisher for the game said that PUBG was to blame because everyone was playing PUBG. People thought that it was Overwatch, like you said. That Overwatch kind of dominates that arena shooter, hero shooter, cartoony looking game. That dominates that space so completely that it's difficult to stand up. There was obviously the other games that followed a similar model and just didn't stand up, like Gearbox's title, which I can't even remember the name of. And that was a similar kind of hero shooter type looking thing. It just looked similar. That's all it is that it looks second to second like it could be kind of the same game, and that is enough to kill it because Overwatch is such a juggernaut. I think it's just a tornado of things that have gone wrong, and it probably just didn't do itself justice in the marketing and didn't do enough to set itself apart and didn't really highlight the zero gravity stuff and the change to the typical rules that because it did do some interesting stuff, but they just didn't. I don't think they got that. They hammered that home quite enough.
Yeah, it was generally well received by the players that were playing it. They were saying that it was a great game. Now, I've had a look at the response of the player base in the subreddit for Lawbreakers, and they're not happy. I picked one out in particular with the most votes. Well, that is an interesting way to build trust with a community of early supporters for your new independent game studio. You're just moving on and expect me to buy a new game? That's going to be a no for me, dog. And a lot of people have voted that comment as obviously it connected most with them. So and in general as well from the subreddit in response to the blog post, players aren't happy. The actual player base that managed to get to stick around, they're just not happy with it.
Yeah, well, I was surprised that there was a subreddit, to be honest, because of how low. And I don't mean that as a little bit of snark or anything. It's just surprised because the player numbers are so low. I guess it makes sense that they would be particularly passionate because the player numbers are low and they want to help the game as much as possible. They want to be as vocal and they will be as actively engaged in that community as much as possible because it's kind of an underdog thing, right? You want to support it. You want to talk about it. And like you said, people did enjoy it when it came out. It was positive kind of reception. So it makes sense that some people a small amount of people are at least really passionate about it. Yeah. It's just a shame. The whole thing, I think, is just.
There's a lot of lessons to be learned here. That's for sure about this type of game. What kind of genre you're getting yourself into, going up against big guns like Overwatch. How to set your game apart. To let people understand what it's going for.
Even if you're Cliff Blesizinski, even if you're like a veteran designer who bloody knows what he's doing, he can make a fun game, and he's really good at multiplayer kind of shooter titles. He's got loads of pedigree, loads of experience. He's a well-known figure. He was on stage at these things. He was like the figurehead for the communication, the marketing for this game, and still, even with all that going in their favour, it still didn't manage to make an impact. I think it's
we wanted him to do well because he was saying the right things for us as a pro consumer channel that we are. He was saying some things that kind of connected with us. So it's a shame to see somebody who says them kind of things, like, and not afraid to say it as well, get on a stage at A3 and saying, what these other developers are doing, it's bullshit. They even mentioned something about of these marketing betas or whatever, these promotional betas and stuff like that. It's like, we don't do any of that bullshit.
And that was last year. That was just before the climate of like the microtransactions, the Battlefront 2 and all that stuff really ignited. This game was positioning itself completely differently, and it like stood out for that reason. And even that wasn't enough to draw an audience, which is
So whatever Cliff B moves on to next, let's hope he manages to make his $1 billion IP that he's so wanting to do. And that wasn't a dig. That was just what he said. What apparently he went into Ubisoft and he pitched to Activision, and he said he walked into a pitch and said, I want to make $1 billion IP. He didn't manage it this time.
That doesn't sound like
doesn't
him.
Sound like him at all.
Are you sure that was him? It's probably someone else.
Well, good luck to you, Cliffy B, wherever you're moving on to. Thanks for watching this video. Any comments or thoughts of your own, leave them down in the comment section as usual. And that's it from me and Mike. We will see you again in the next video. Until then, bye for now.